Hey everybody, Mr. May here. We're going to start the next unit, which is on trig. It's all on trig stuff. So we're going to start with reviewing right triangles. So we will get to sine, cosine, tangent here pretty soon. But first going to talk about the 45-45-90 rule and 30-60-90 rule from geometry. Now, depending on who you had, there were maybe one method taught differently than from one teacher and then differently from another teacher. So I'm actually going to show two different methods of how to do these types of examples. And I'm going to start by talking about the proportion method. To do the proportion method, you need to use the triangle given. So we're just taking a look at this 45-45-91. And we're going to use the fact that we had to find two sides. And notice that both these sides here, x and y, are the leg. So whichever one you find first is going to be the same answer for the other variable, considering that if you look on this 45-45-90 triangle here, we know that the legs are the exact same because they're both 1. And just to make sure you guys were aware, or in case you forgot, how we got these numbers here for the 45-45-90 triangle and I got these sides here for 30-60-90 triangle was using the Pythagorean theorem. If only that we had time together in class, we could talk about that. So I know you guys are missing out on that. But anyway, the proportion method is this, okay? We're going to find x. So we need to create a proportion. So I'm going to use the fact that 4 represents the hypotenuse, and I'm going to create a fraction, x over 4. Going off of the 45-45-90 triangle here, the x represented one of the legs, and that leg here is 1, over the hypotenuse for this 45-45-90 was the square root of 2. So that way we have the leg, leg equaling a leg, and a hypotenuse equaling a hypotenuse. And then we're going to cross multiply. We have x square root of 2 equals 4. Divide both sides by the square root of 2. Remember, we can't have the square roots in the bottom, so we have to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. And we have 4 radical 2 over 2, which translates to 2 radical 2. And that represents the x. It also represents the y, because they're both the same. And that's the proportion method, okay? Now, the other method would be just using the information from the 45-45-90 and multiply or divide by a specific number. Let's use that method for the next part. Okay, so right away you should realize the value of y is also 3 radical 2 because they're both the same length. But to find x, you have to remember that here, for the hypotenuse, the square root of 2 represents that many times bigger than the leg. So, based off of that, to find the x, you need to multiply by the square root of 2. Okay? So, you're not distributing like square root 2 into 3 and into square root 2. It's just 3 root 2 times root 2, which means it's going to be 3 times 2 because square root 2 times square root 2 is just 2. And you're left with 6, and that's what x is. Okay, so we use the information from the top here to say, well, square root 2 means it's that many times bigger than the leg. Now, to figure out the next part here, you can again create a proportion. So we're going to create a proportion. I'm going to find y first. So here's a proportion, y over 12. Y represents the side, because this is where it gets important that you identify the correct sides. The y here represented the side opposite of the 30 degrees. So the side opposite of 30 degrees here was 1. So I have 1 on top. And this 12 represents the side opposite of the 60 degrees. And that, in the original one, was the square root of 3. And now you will cross multiply. Bada boom, bada boom. And you have y equals, the y times the square root of 3 equals 12. Divide both sides by square root of 3. Again, no radicals in the denominator, so you have to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3, and you get 12 square root of 3 over 3, which is 4 square root of 3. So that's what y equals. Based on the other method, you can see that 12 represents the square root of 3 in this triangle here. That's how many times bigger it is from the leg opposite of the 30 degrees. Since we were given that leg opposite of the 60 degrees, what we want to do is we want to work backwards. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So instead, you would have divided 12 by the square root of 3 to get this guy, and you will realize that it's the same method as when we were doing the proportion, because you had 12 over square root of 3, which obviously ended up being 4 radical 3 after you've applied the fact that you can't have radicals in the denominator, so you'd multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3 and then simplify from there. Okay? So the way to get x represents the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is 2 times bigger than the leg opposite of the 30 degree. So to find x, take 4, oops, I actually need the pen. Oh, didn't work. There we go. Okay, so now we're good. Backtrack there. There we go. So to find, again, as I was saying, to find x, what you can do is take 4 radical 3 and multiply it by 2, which gives you 8 radical 3. And that goes for x there. Okay? You could have also used the proportion method to find x. What you would do is you would do x over 12 equals, since x is the hypotenuse, based on the right triangle up here for 30, 60, 90, it was 2 over the square root of 3. And cross multiply would give you x times the square root of 3 equals 24. Divide both sides by square root of 3 would give you 24 radical 3 over 3, which gives you 8 radical 3. As you can see, it's the exact same thing. Whichever method you decide to use, go for it. All right? It's all about preference. So in the examples here, what I would recommend doing is anytime you're going to deal with a problem involving 30, 60, 90 triangles or 45, 45, 90 triangles, it would be a good idea to at least draw the picture of the 30, 60, 90 triangle, 1, square root of 3, and 2. So that way you can easily find the missing sides without having to do it by memory. So always draw the picture. That's my idea. So in this practical example here, it's actually kind of funny is that this is just the exact same original triangle over 30, 60, 90. So y is equal to 1 and x is equal to 2 since it's the hypotenuse. To do the next one, and I'm just going to pick a method and I'm going to stick with that method for the remainder of this slide. But if you want to use the other method, then please go for it in the future problems. But here we have a 30, 60, 90. And what we're given off the bat is the 30 degrees. So we know that B is the side opposite the 60, which means that is your quote-unquote radical 3. So to find that, I'm going to take 2 radical 3 and multiply it by radical 3. This will eliminate the radicals, and you're left with 2 times 3, which is 6, and that is your B. To find A is 2 times bigger than the side opposite of the 30 degree. So that is 2 radical 3 times 2, which is equal to 4 radical 3, which is A. All right. Sweet. To find the next part here, you are going to use the 45, 45, 90. So I'm going to draw the 45, 45, 90. It's not going to be an exact because I am a terrible drawer. So there's my 45, there's my 45, and that's 1, 1, radical 2. Again, just getting that off the fact that it's using the Pythagorean theorem. Alright, so what we're given to start is actually the hypotenuse. Based on the information here, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2 times bigger than the leg. So how we got 10 is you multiply these legs here by the square root of 2. So to find the legs, we have to go in reverse order. We're going to take 10 and divide it by the square root of 2. And that will give us our legs. We can't have square roots in the bottom, so you multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. And we're left with 5 radical 2, and that's what it is for x, and that's what it is for y, since they are the same. We like 45, 45, 90s because they're pretty straightforward. And the next one, we are given a leg, which means the other leg is the same. And to find the hypotenuse, you need to take the leg and multiply it by the square root of 2, which is the 6 square root of 2. In that case, it was x. Okay? So that is all for the 45, 45, 90. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second video on the next page, and that way I can break it up a little bit for you guys. All right? So I'm going to pause here and go ahead and pick up on the next video for the next page.